How's it going, man?
It's going. I was working on the Jeep a little bit before I came up here, so kept all my fingers and toes attached.
Nice. What's going on with the Jeep?
So I got in an accident, and I thought the insurance company was going to total it, and thankfully they didn't because I slid over. It was really slippery. It was raining, and I was driving. I was around this corner. I was driving safely. I wasn't on my phone, and like 15 miles an hour, I slid into the other lane, going around this curve right before this bridge, and I smacked this lady that was going about 40, and
Holy
she's
shit.
fine. Yeah, but it essentially like squished my frame like pretty badly because the brunt of it was like the axle, so it
Mm.
shifted the axle and the frame over, and the body is fine. So the insurance company like covered it. I thought they were going to total it. They tried taking it to Copart, and I intervened just like on a gut feeling. I was like, something doesn't seem right, and an appraiser came out and gave me what I needed to fix it. So I took that opportunity to upgrade a bunch of other stuff. So it's like, can of worms.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So basically, what I wanted to do is talk about like what this is for me. This project that I'm kind of starting is like a professional development project for me. So basically, what I'm trying to do is like get people on here, weightlifters, coaches, and just like get different perspectives for people for like training, um, to help me like as an athlete and a coach. So, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. I'm Cam Brown. Some of you might know me as Cameron Brown is Stronger Than You. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably don't. And I've competed in Olympic weightlifting for the last 15, 16 years in numerous weight categories, starting from 77 up to 96.
Nice. And so we met back in Nashville in I think it was 2020, right? When I moved down there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember I was moving down to Nashville in 2020, and I remember before I moved down to Tennessee, I was looking up the state records in Tennessee because I wanted to see. I was like, what's going on in Tennessee? What kind of weightlifting they got? So I remember looking, and I think you had the records in both the 89s and the 96s. And I think you'd hit like what you'd snatch like 130 or 135 is it an 89?
Yes. Yeah. At that time.
And so I remember like seeing I was like, who the fuck is this Cam Brown guy? Like this guy looks pretty fucking strong. And then I remember going to Nashville Weightlifting Club and walking in the first day, and you were there and you introduced yourself, and I was like, I bet this is the guy. I bet this is the record holder. And sure enough, you were. And yeah, from there we became training partners. We trained pretty much like every day for a couple years until you moved off and left us.
Yeah. That was a
So
sad day.
it
Yeah.
was.
I'm also pretty sure I was the only one in the gym that day when you came in.
I'm pretty sure you were too. I'm pretty sure it's there's been a resurgence at NWC. I feel like since then, but
Oh
at that
yeah.
time it was pretty slim. It's just like me and you. I think Eric.
Yeah.
But yeah, good times. So yeah, so basically, what I want this to be is kind of more of like a conversation, just kind of getting into different topics, things you want to talk about, things I want to talk about. So what I wanted to kind of start with is you've been in the sport for a long time. So how have you seen like USAW weightlifting in the United States? How have you seen it kind of change and progress since you've been in the sport? And is there like a certain direction that you'd like to see things go, or a certain direction that like anything that you'd like change in terms of like the trajectory of the sport?
Yeah. I mean, I could have said it better myself. I've seen a lot of different looks as far as USAW and priorities and directions under different administration and leadership. I remember when I first got into, weightlifting, you could go to the Arnold and it was still the Arnold Classic. It wasn't, an American Open series. And there'd be cash prizes for every weight category, Sinclair cash prizes. So it was a lot more lucrative back then, but it was a much more niche sport. And for the longest time, when I originally got into it, I almost felt like it was one of those weird, obscure sports that you had to know somebody that knew somebody to get into it. And as that climate kind of changed and USAW matured, They started prioritizing other things, and I kind of saw a shift uh, for more of participation. They did a lot of things to try to grow the number of participants in weight classes, which I thought was great for the sport. I really thought it was heading in a really, really good direction. And, I feel like it still is. I think that we've kind of derailed and we're getting lost in the weeds as far as what matters most in the sport. And you kind of see that in other niche sports like the equivalent for like American wrestling and going through that whole process with wrestling. It's very similar to Olympic weightlifting, and it's a lot more lucrative. They support their athletes a little bit better. They have a little bit more different opportunities for success, and I'd like to see that a little bit more as far as more opportunities for other athletes to maybe ignite that fire as far as opportunity to go compete in other countries. It almost seems like you have to be in a fraternity to get to go to even the smallest meets like the Caribbean Open, or before all the stuff with Russia, like the Russian President's Cup and all these one-off meets that were considered international, but not maybe top brass. So I would like to see that. It seems like they're kind of making that push a little bit with masters athletes,
Mhm.
which I think is a step in the right direction. But I think more support for the open division would be great. And it's kind of funny for me to say that because I'm technically a masters athlete now. So
How is that? How's the master's life?
well, I've lied about it at two meets to where I lied about my age, so I'd be in the open.
Well, you could still compete as a senior when you're a master's athlete, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. When I was younger, I used to. I worded it very poorly, but I would say stuff like, "Oh, well, like I would never want to compete as a master," and it's my ego, it's my arrogance, it's my sportsmanship. Where if I show up a meet, I'm not looking at who's got the heaviest total in my age group. I'm looking at who's got the heaviest total at the meet,
Yep.
and I doubt it'll ever change, but
Yeah,
I'll
I
probably end up
do.
getting hurt.
I remember that conversation clearly. I remember because when I came to Nashville in 2020, I mean, you were already what, 33 in 2020,
Uh,
32.
32. Yeah.
Yeah, so you were getting close to like the Masters cut off, and I was like, so what's gonna happen like when you turn 35 and you're like, I'm shutting it down, I'm retiring, that's it. So I'm glad to hear that the fire's not gonna die just because you turned 35.
Yeah, I thought about it, and there was a couple revamps, as Steve is well aware. Uh, I think this is my second rebuild with Steve since I've been in Chattanooga, and Steve's my coach at Tennessee Speed and Strength. Steve Fowler is a great coach, and he's kind of accustomed to me like kind of going through the paces, hitting those milestones, making my comeback. And we actually had a conversation a few weeks ago. He's like, man, this might be the last one. You might want to hold on to it. You might not want to take 6 months off to build another house or something. You might not be able to get it back.
Yeah. Well, talk about that a little bit. So you've trained with like a number of coaches, and for those that don't know, if anyone is listening, um, for those of you that may not know, Steve Fowler is coach of Olivia Reeves, she's in, right? She's going to the Olympics. Is that final or?
They haven't announced it, but yes. I mean, she's
Yeah,
probably a shoe-in if anyone.
yeah, she's our best weightlifter in the U.S. Definitely on the women's side. I think.
Oh, for
Yeah,
sure.
she's in number one in the world, right? I think. Yeah, she's our top weightlifter.
Mhm.
But anyway, he's her coach, and you've been training with Steve now for has it been like 2 years?
About 3 years.
Okay. So what have you kind of taken? What are the big things that are maybe like different in terms of like Steve's philosophy with training? Like what have you taken from his approach in terms of like things that have helped you progress as an athlete?
So it was honestly a complete 180. A little bit about my background. Like I train almost strictly Bulgarian, and I guess if you're a purist, you're going to say it was a modified Bulgarian. But I would do heavy singles on either snatch, clean and jerk, or variant, which would be a power, or from the blocks, or from the hang to heavy single, and then heavy single front squat, back squat, or a pause. And I did that for almost 10 years. And luckily, no major injuries other than self-inflicted. And then I transitioned to working with Steve, and I'd known Steve gosh, almost from day one. I think I had been weightlifting for 3 years when I discovered Steve Fowler, and this is before Olivia Reeves. And not a lot of people know this, but that's not the first athlete he's coached to the Olympic trials, and he's very small. It's very one off. He was a phenomenal coach. He was a phenomenal athlete. Um, so I ended up going out there, and I remember the first day he's like, all right, well, what are you doing for the program? I was like, this. And he's like, well, how's that working out for you? And I was like, well, not bad. And he's like, well, you bombed out your last three mates, so it's not working out too well. And I'm like, well, that hurts. Uh, but it's a very non-systematic approach to training. It's a level of experience that you can only get from being in the sport for as long as he has. And his approach is, how does he look today? Is he tired? Is he beat up? What did we do last week? Is he looking strong? Can we push his numbers? Do we need to change his maxes? Do we need to ramp down his maxes? Do we need to ramp down the volume? Is he older? And it's like, here's the rubric, and then here's what you're doing. It might be modified a little bit, it might be one for one. So it really just kind of depends. So he kind of customizes it based on the individual, and then honestly how the athletes are looking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a 180.
Yeah, no, that's so I trained with Steve for a while. He was coaching me for a while remotely. And that's I really liked the like you said, it's like a non-systematic approach to training, right? It's like because the traditional kind of like American periodization style is like you set these like 12, 16 week cycles, you kind of progress through the cycle. And him is like, hey, it's like a different workout every day. Like we did fucking power snatches and squats and cleans, and like the next day we're doing something like completely different. It's like every workout is different, and it's like you said, it's dependent on like the athletes, dependent on how things are moving and how things are looking. So yeah, I'm a really big fan of that approach, and I use like the way I work with my athletes. It's kind of a blend. I still like to have like repeated exposure to the same thing. So like this, the structure of the workouts are going to stay the same kind of week to week, where we're doing like the same variance, and we'll do that for like 3 to 4 weeks. But the intensity, the volume could change based on like the way the athlete is responding, right? If they're like not handling it well, or things are looking slow, or they're like a little beat up, we may like dial the intensity or dial the volume back. So it's a little, the approach I use is a little more hybridized, where it's like there's enough repeated exposure to like the same kind of movements, but it's going to vary depending on the athlete's response to it. So, what else in terms of like your training philosophy? Like, what else has changed with like when you moved out there and started working with Steve?
It's definitely a much heavier emphasis on technique. He's a bit of a Nazi when it comes to technique and or form. And I mean, it's not cookie cutter either. He's not going to sit there and be like, your hips need to be at this angle above your knees, and your chest needs to be here, and your back needs to be here. And he's not running around with a PVC pipe. But he'll watch you, especially like if you're new, which I've been around him long enough now to where if somebody new comes in and they can snatch and they can clean and jerk and they're decent, he's not going to say anything to you for the first week or two, and he almost make you feel like he's not even watching you. And then one day he'll have like a 45-minute conversation with you about how your weight's too far over on your toes and you compensate, and that's why you're jumping forward, you're not setting your back, you're not keeping your chest up. And I went from where I would miss anywhere from 5 to 10 reps a training session to now where I hardly ever miss.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like to the point now where it's like you jump forward an inch, and you did that because you didn't take the time to put your feet in the exact same spot as you did in the last one. And that's where we are at now. And I think when I first came on, like I was doing like more of a dynamic start where I looked like John North and my chest was really dropping over the bar. And then I was very violent with the hips and very fast underneath the bar. And, and to Steve's credit, he'd be like, wow, when you're on,
Mm-hmm.
but you're only on 1 out of 15 times. And if we can get you on, 9 times out of 10 with 1 kilo less, we'll take that any day of the week.
For sure, for
So,
sure. Yeah, that's something. I mean, we trained, kind of in the same style under the same school in Nashville for a while, and that's something that changed when I started working with Steve is like the emphasis on consistency, right? Because I mean, man, I'd watch you like try to snatch 140 off the blocks or like something like that, 130, 140, whatever, and you take it 12 times and you'd hit it once, right? It's like, great, I snatched 140, but you also miss 140 like a shit ton of times, right? And that doesn't really
Yeah.
set you up for success in competition versus Steve, like you said, he's like really drilling that like consistency, which is so important in weightlifting. I mean, you got to make lifts, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciated like that approach as well. So what else are you working on in terms of like you're talking about, this is another kind of comeback for you. What are the things that you're like emphasizing in terms of like technique, your training?
So my biggest struggle, I think, throughout my entire career has been like my jerk. And I think the main goals that we're emphasizing for this training block or this coming year is perfecting the jerk. I used to always brag and say stuff like, I can clean whatever I want. And to a degree, I still can, but I can't clean and jerk what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cleaning and jerking 30 to 40 kilos less than I can clean. And that's a big deficit. So we've definitely emphasized a lot of drills, of me not throwing my head back, I mean, we've tried squat jerk, power jerk, split jerk. I've actually switched my foot that goes forward. And
Really?
oh yeah. And it's kind of funny because if I was gonna kick, like I'm like right leg dominant with everything, but it's goofy. So like when I ride a skateboard, it's right foot forward. If I kick a ball, it's left foot. If I jerk, it was right foot. Now it's left foot. But when I first started out weightlifting, it was left foot. So it's just I think that I overthought too many little things. And now, ironically, I had an injury where I got a really bad bone bruise on my collarbone. I was power cleaning something and I hit it really, really hard. And I couldn't clean for or jerk for almost a month. And when I came back, I put a lot of emphasis on just that rack position. And then, I used to readjust, kind of drop down and then jerk from there. It's putting a lot of pressure on my collarbone. So we just started working on a dip and drive in that rack position. And then I was readjusting. And believe it or not, it's kind of funny to say when I was at my strongest, I was doing that unconsciously.
Mm.
And now I'm intentionally doing it. I'm seeing really good results from it.
Nice. What's the most you've clean jerked recently?
Recently, 160, and then I had 5 or 6 pretty good cracks with 165, and that was probably 10 kilos heavier than I had gone in the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
So
Nice. So which is a better problem to have because you can clean whatever you want and then you struggle with the jerk. I can jerk 170 pretty consistently plus. But 150 plus is like a starts to become a pretty tough clean for me. So like which issue would you rather have or which scenario?
I feel like, and I'll give a shout out to National Weightlifting Club. I think they put a lot of emphasis on like passion or aggression or
Mm,
grit and training through injuries, training through pain, and making you generally very strong. But it's like I can find some adrenaline. I can find some childhood trauma. I can think about my dad going to the gas station, never coming back, and like figure out a way to stand up with the clean. But it doesn't matter if I can't put it over my head. So if I've got a bet on just raw adrenaline, I'd rather be able to jerk whatever I wanted and just dive under a clean and try to stand up with it.
yeah. I agree. I think like, and I think when you look at like the top level lifters, generally most people are gonna have a jerk that's like over their clean, just because like you got to have an excess of strength in the jerk because when you're getting to maximal weights, like if you're grinding out a tough clean, you have to have that can't also be your max jerk, right? Because if it is a maximal clean, you've used most of your energy on that clean. It's going to be tough to put that together with a jerk. So I agree generally I would like to see people with a excess of strength in the jerk, kind of relative to the clean. So talk to me a little bit about mindset, because you talked about summoning the demons and digging into some of that trauma. What's the your mindset that you bring to training? Because I definitely saw some interesting stuff when we were training together at NWC.
It, you know, there's a few different things that and like I've got a really good friend. He calls it the jar on the shelf, and it's like all the vendettas or all the chips on your shoulder that you learn to kind of control, and those monsters that you learn how to control, and you kind of keep it on the shelf. But I don't know what was wrong with me as a kid. I think it was my mom, but she kind of convinced me and my sister that we weren't like just normal kids, that we had denser bones, we had denser ligaments, and like we were more durable. And so it kind of carried over into like my adulthood a little bit. I would definitely say like my early to mid 20s, because I've done a lot of different things. I put my body through a lot of meat grinders, and I'm very fortunate to have minimal injuries in my mid 30s. But I just kind of took that to heart. I just said I'm really durable. I'm just dense, and I am dense in certain ways, like as far as like ankles or knees or back. But I think it's a combination of that, and then it's just this incessant drive that I think everyone has in them. And I think that some people might say stuff like, "Well, that's easy for a man to say." And I've seen it in women, or it's easy for you to say that, or I'm dealing with this and this and this. There are different motivators that outline that type of drive, and I've been very fortunate. You talked about Olivia. I've trained with a lot of very different high level athletes throughout my tenure in sports, and it seems like the ones that are outperforming the other ones, at least with effort, is because they have a why. Whether it's they want to prove it to themselves, whether they want to prove it to other people, which I don't think is a good motivator, or they're just trying to release some demons, and they get a stressful home life, or they've got internal struggles in their past, or military experiences and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of different types of fuel, and I think it's a good way to exhaust those issues in a healthy way, and in sport, to where you get something good out of it. It's like
Yeah,
I mean, it's the purest definition of an outlet to me. It's having
yeah,
that outlet for those things.
I agree 100%. And it's interesting you say like I think that's the difference, if I'm getting this right, between like intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic, right? So intrinsic is like I'm doing this for me, I'm doing this because I want to, and I want to prove it to myself or whatever. And extrinsic is like doing it for other people or doing it for like awards and like to like impress people. Um, yeah, you mentioned that like you don't think that's a good idea, and I think generally it's accepted that like intrinsic motivation, doing it for like yourself, is a better motivator, like whatever that reason is.
Well, and I should probably clarify, because I think that there are exceptions to that, because that was kind of a generalization.
Yeah,
If you're doing it for your family, or you're doing something for a loved one, that would be a better example of just saying, I want to prove to the world that I'm worth something. Well, you should really stop and look in the mirror and say, well, what is my worth, and what am I trying to show other people? But if you're doing it for a loved one, or a real low hanging fruit on this one's that Mathis Steiner story about how he did it for his late
right.
wife. I mean, that's a good example of doing it for other people that I think are very pure and truly good motivators.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because like looking back on like my training history, some of the best periods of training that I've ever had are when like there's shit that's going on in my life, right? Like I'm pissed off about something or I'm dealing with something. So it's just really interesting to see how that like mentality kind of like plays into training, right? Because
Yeah.
and I think it's like I think honestly, like you said, it's a mental outlet, right? Like if if you're dealing with something stressful or you're dealing with something in your life, there's like different ways that you can cope with it and manage it. And I think training is like a healthy way to do that, to go into the gym and say, fuck it, I'm going to give it my all and like do the best that I can. So yeah, to me, I think, it can be that kind of like psychological like outlet for you.
Well, and I'm surrounded by, not surrounded. There's a few kids that train with Steve, and to that point, the first time, and I was stuck at 135 for the longest time on a snatch. When I was a 77, I snatched 135, and I kind of carried that same snatch to 85 for years. And I was going through, just a very rough time in my life. And, I was sick and I didn't want to go to the gym. I hadn't really eaten a whole lot that day, was having a bad day at work. And I was like, I'm just going to go to the gym anyway. And that was the first time I broke through that 135 threshold, was at 140. And I say this to the kids all the time. I'm like, you're capable of doing it. You just have to figure out a way to not care,
Mm,
because you're caring too much about what's going to happen to you. You just got to do what you're supposed to do, exactly what you're supposed to do, as fast as you can possibly do it. And if you do, you're probably going to end up with something you haven't done before. But you're protecting yourself. You're always athletic enough. You're fast enough. If you got it to that point to where you're getting under it, you're strong enough. You're athletic enough to get away from it. But it's just finding like that drive to turn off, that self preservation, whether it's through frustration, anger, whatever it might be. Hopefully, they're a little bit better than those options. But it happens sometimes, and you, again, like you said, you can use it for good.
yeah, yeah. It does. I know it doesn't work for everyone because I've talked with my athletes about this, and some people like can use anger and like emotion to like drive their lifts and like drive performance, and other people just like fucks them up, right? If they like try to like think angry thoughts or whatever, it just totally fucks them up. So I think like every person is different, but I think yeah, some people can like channel emotion, channel whatever it is into like improved performance. And it's interesting. You said you basically what were your words? Basically, you have to not care, right? Like learn to not care. There was I don't know if you watched that documentary on Johnny Manziel when he was talking about when they went to play at Alabama and they were like this huge underdog and like expected to lose and everything. And he's like, we went into that game, we did not give a fuck. And he's like, when you don't give a fuck, that's when you play your best. And so
Yeah,
it's kind of like the same concept, right? When you're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna send it. Like I don't care what happens.
yeah.
Like good things can happen.
Yeah, I think the first time I think you realized I was a little off, I think I was whispering to myself, burn the fucking boats. And that's what I thought of when you said that. You just gotta burn the fucking boats, man.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So tell me this: what's when you're like approaching a heavy lift? What's going through your mind? What's your like? What's the self talk? What's the mentality like when you're going to the bar for a heavy lift?
So it kind of depends on the day of the week, to be honest. And I'm not, diagnosed with schizophrenia or anything, but I think most days it's focusing on like this. It's really speed. Like, so I try to like listen to screamo music or like rolling dumpster fire with robots in it, like just like loud, fast music. And then I just think about like concentrated chaos. I think of like sweeping the bar back and then just being violent and explosive. So it's a combination of like visualization for me, because I think about what my body needs to do and how it needs to move. And then it's just like harboring that strength, whether it's me thinking of something, fucked up, or me like getting jazzed up by the music, or me relying on, two bang energy drinks that I just chugged in the parking lot. I'm trying to do one now. It's probably bad for my heart, but and then just, I've coined this phrase, and people are gonna think I'm nuts when I say this, but it's I call it like getting sparky. And that's like the best way I can describe the feeling, because it's like violent, explosive, and fast. And like I think of like a spark of electricity. So I just try to embody that. And I kind of carry that into snatch, clean and jerk, and then heavy back squats. Not so much front squats. I try to be a little bit more lackadaisical with front squats just because the ankles bend way too much for front squats sometimes,
Hmm.
and I just crash.
So would you say so? It's like less when you're approaching the bar for heavy lift. It's like less kind of like cueing or talking through, and it's more of like a like you said like visualization, and then it seems like kind of like harnessing the energy of like what you want to experience. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah. So, and in my experience, I think that if you're thinking a lot about form, there might be one thing you need to be focused on. Like, if I'm going to do a heavy snatch, it's keep my chest up, like chest
Mm-hmm.
up, and that's only if I feel like I'm prone to dropping my chest. And I'd say 96% of the time, if I'm on and I'm maxing out, I'm not thinking about that. I think about my form to about 80%. And after that, it's just about being fluid and making sure that like I'm just finishing my pull. Like
Mm-hmm.
so I don't think about technique, I don't think about form because at that point it's kind of ingrained in you. It's like you as you're warming up and you're doing, maybe 5 reps for one set at 70%. Like that's when you should be getting down what you need to be doing. That's when you need to be focusing it because at that point it's like I can kind of make those fine adjustments or those fine changes, but then when you start getting heavier, now you're relying more on reflex. It's like, what did I warm up with, what did I prime with, because it carries over. If you warm up bad, you're going to max out bad. You're not going to figure it out. Like if you're not figuring it out with 70%, you're not going to figure it out with 90%. You're delusional. Like you've got hit in the head too many times. Like that's not how it works. Like trust me, I've tried for like 15 years, it doesn't work. uh, it doesn't. So I think any point after 80%, you should just be focused on staying in the zone, staying like in a good place to go heavy, being in your own little bubble, your own little realm, listening to music or listening to your internal thoughts, and just kind of staying in that groove and don't get distracted.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's what I talk about with my athletes too is like just like you said, your time to like think through the technique and like kind of feel through the technique is like your build up or your warm up to those top sets. Once you get to the top sets, you shut the mind off, right? Like you said, maybe there's like one thing that you're focusing on. But the way that I tell people to approach it is instead of like telling yourself, hey, finish my pull, or keep the bar close or like whatever it is, more like visualize yourself doing it, right? Like visualize the lift, see yourself doing that thing that you want to focus on, and then just set up and freaking go. Like trust your body. Your body, you've trained it to do what it needs to do. Shut the mind off and basically let it do its thing.
Yeah, you move way too fast to try to make corrections like that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, there's another. I had thought there's something I was going to ask, but I can't remember it. Maybe it'll come back to me. Um, Talk about this. So you were a gym owner for a period of time. Talk about that experience a little bit. What's it like kind of owning a gym and then like being an athlete at the same time?
It's consuming. It's all consuming. I owned a gym for 2 years, and I had worked at that gym for about 2 years prior to that. And the whole time I was exclusively weightlifting minus like one CrossFit competition that I did for fun. And it's difficult because what I struggled with the most was having a personal life. And I think that I got really good training out of it. Uh, I got really good about training alone. I was motivated to train alone, which is it's difficult to do. I was training at 8, 9 o'clock at night with no one in the
Mm,
gym. And so I got really deep into motivational YouTube videos with that real theatrical music and the snippets of all the movies with the good scenes. And I was living vicariously through my clients and their life events or their heartache. And I needed to take a step back because I was doing a lot of it myself. I had business partners, and I ultimately sold to those business partners. And I can say from personal experience, going into business with friends is a horrible idea because you care about the friendship, you care about what they think, you put too much thought and energy into things that you shouldn't be thinking about from a business standpoint. And then you end up ruining a friendship, and you end up ruining a business, or vice versa, or both, or neither. But it makes it a lot more difficult. And on top of all of that, I really was just trying to maintain strength. And after I sold that gym, that's when I started training with Osman. And I took a sabbatical for about a year after I sold the gym. And my lifts almost, I think both lifts went up 6 or 7 kilos, like from the moment that I sold that gym.
Mm.
So I mean, it was a great experience. I made a lot of friends. That's how I met Steve. I met Kendrick Ferris. I met a bunch of guys that played in the NFL. John Cena came in one day. That was pretty cool.
Oh wow.
So I mean, yeah, and I mean Chris Henderson. He's the guitarist for Three Doors Down. He came in all the time. Early Mandrell, the Mandrell sisters. Like you get a lot of opportunities to meet a lot of very interesting people, and then even like some high performance athletes, and then you get to pick their brains. Like we had Shane Sweat from Westside Barbell that came in and did a bunch of powerlifting seminars for us. Great guy, I love talking to him. He helped me significantly. Hamstring development is so overlooked in Olympic weightlifting. It's not even funny.
Mm.
Uh, but you got a lot of really good networking opportunities and personal development. I think I learned how to talk to people better. I learned how to articulate points better. And I made a bunch of lifelong friends that I still keep up with to this day. Uh, but yeah, from a weightlifting standpoint, no, it's horrible. It's very difficult to get stronger owning a gym.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it.
It's something I've considered is like having a physical location because everything I do is like online, and I've intentionally set it up that way because it gives me flexibility, and it allows me to have like a work life balance, right? Which it seems like is a lot harder to do if you have a physical location and you have like specific hours. I mean, yours is a CrossFit gym, so you had like classes and stuff like that. But even a weightlifting gym, if you've got like certain specific hours that are like coaching hours, then you're kind of locked into being in a physical location in that time. So yeah, I was just curious, like, is that something you'd ever like consider doing again, or was that kind of like a one-off like thing in the past?
So believe it or not, you're not the first person to ask me that, and I won't go into details. But I've had a conversation with someone about getting back into it eventually, and it's not off the table because I greatly enjoy working with athletes. I greatly enjoy working with kids, and seeing them develop and help them learn life lessons. And you see a transformation not just with strength, but with confidence, with kinesthetic awareness, with camaraderie, with friendships. So you get to be a pivotal part, especially in like kids' lives developing, but adults too. I mean, I've seen grown adults go from very reclusive individuals to be very go outgoing, and they kept that for the rest of their life. So yeah, I would just have to be to a point where I was done competing and had the time to where I could properly devote myself to that.
Yeah, interesting. Well, hey, I would like to see that. I think that'd be pretty cool. Would you think like another CrossFit gym or like weightlifting or like just a general like sports performance? Like what do you think?
I'd say sports performance because I think that Olympic weightlifting and sports performance go together like peanut butter and jelly,
Yeah,
and you end up getting either a great athlete or a great weightlifter.
right.
And you think that'd be one and the same, but and it can be, but they can be also be very different.
Yeah, it's that's I think that's generally the model that like most gyms that want to be weightlifting gyms or like powerlifting gyms use is like, hey, like we'll have a weightlifting program, but like we're also doing like the kids like sport development stuff. Because honestly, that's like gonna pay the bills, right? You're gonna get a lot more people that are interested in doing that type of stuff than people that are just strictly weightlifters or powerlifters or whatever. So awesome. Well, hey, let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, something that I know you're well versed in, doping.
Oh God. Why do I have these conversations like once a week?
So what are your thoughts on I know we've talked about
Everybody's doing them.
okay.
Everybody.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the current state of like anti-doping in terms of like the IWF? I guess it'd be WADA in terms of like what they're doing, and I don't know anything that you change in terms of like current doping policies.
So I'm going to sound crazy when I say this, but like, it's not. I'm not going to go down this whole rabbit hole. But WADA is three steps behind everybody else, and there's a lot of like a lot of evidence that suggests that they don't know what they're doing, and with a little bit of know-how or any type of like science background or chemistry background, it's easy to see that there are a lot of loopholes in their methodology, especially with drug testing. Many people might know this, and I'm going to generalize this because I don't know the numbers off my head, but individuals of Asian descent have a much higher probability of having this gene that makes it undetectable with our current protocol of drug testing for them to detect testosterone levels. So you could have synthetic testosterone in, say, Lu Xiaojun, and if he has this gene, there's no way for them to detect an abnormal level of testosterone in his system. So that's just like one drop in the bucket. Then they talk about gene doping, or they talk about these other like EPO or blood doping, and so there's all these different like cocktails of pharmacology, and you could even throw like Eastern medicine on top of that. Like you'll see those podcasts with Dr. Huberman, and he's talking about Tungat Ali and all this other stuff. Well, that's like 20-year-old science. It's 20-year-old pharmacology for them. They've got way better stuff on shelves in some of these countries that we don't even know exist. And then let's say some good old fashioned, Trembolone. Like if you've got enough money for WADA, they'll be like, all right, you're good. We're not going to drug test you. Or North Korea, like good luck getting somebody over there to drug test someone because you're going to end up in a coal mine for 20
Mm-hmm.
years. Like it's not going to happen. That's why they're not allowed to compete at the Olympics. So it's a running joke, and you know, I got a few buddies that play professional sports from like the MLB, from the NFL, and I've had very candid conversations because they don't care. I mean, they're retired, and like especially like in the NFL, that's low. That's an easy one. They tell you exactly when you're going to get drug tested, what time of year they're going to drug test you, what they're testing you for, and if you fail, they'll assume that it's a false positive. They'll give you special consulting with a doctor to make sure that you're not eating tainted meat. They'll give you like 6 weeks, and then they'll re-drug test you. So if that doesn't seem like a huge loophole, I don't know what is. And I mean, they're stacked to the gills. And like it's a contact sport. I don't blame them. If they're taking HGH, which is human growth hormone, if they're taking stem cells, which are unassigned cells that you can get from, fat and numerous other methods, uh, that's cheating. That's enhanced. It's like, where do you want to draw the line? Like we could talk about Tiger Woods and him getting LASIK eye surgery to make his vision better than 2020.
Mm-hmm.
We can go down this route. You could even talk about protocols as far as regulations with John Jones. He was hiding under an octagon to avoid getting tested because you can essentially be absent for 3 drug tests in a row before it's a hypothetical suspension. So
Mm-hmm.
say you get 3 no-shows, we'll show up for your fourth one, pee in a cup, and then you get 3 more opportunities to be a no-show. So it's there's numerous ways to cheat the system. And back to testosterone. I personally know a very high level weightlifter who's retired now, who was taking synthetic testosterone, and he was getting drug tested, and no one was none the wiser because his levels for their protocol, or as far as like their procedures for drug testing, is if it's less than 2,000 nanograms per deciliter. I think that's right. I'm probably wrong.
Mm-hmm.
they don't drug test you, which the normal range is considered to be between 300 and 1,000 for men. In the 1950s was a lot higher, but that's fluoride. Um, but they won't drug test. There's a specialized test for testosterone. It's like 25 grand for them to do. So they're
Mm,
just checking your testosterone level. And if it's like 5,000, then they're gonna be like, okay, hang on. We need a guy to pee in this cup. Watch, it's gonna melt. But they're not gonna do that if there's no abnormality. So if you're
mm,
consistently, 2,000, 2,500, they're gonna be like, well, he's just really high T. And they're not gonna spend $25,000 to figure out if you're a liar or not. So that's just my superficial knowledge too. Like there are people that have dedicated careers that if you Google something in the right sequence of words, you can find them, and they'll charge you anywhere from $500 to $1,500 an hour to tell you exactly what to take so you don't get popped on these protocols. And a lot of
mm,
the time, they work for USADA or they work for WADA, and they can circumnavigate. Oh, and one more, just because it came to me. I knew a girl that worked for USADA, and she was a chemist. And NASCAR, they pop all the time for meth. But then if they say I have a problem, then they enter them into a rehab program. It doesn't get released, and then it goes away, and then they go back into to circuit.
mm. Interesting. So what you're saying is that okay, so if everyone has these like complex methods for like cheating the system and getting around the tests and stuff, then how do people still get popped? Do they just
So
like fuck up their cycle or?
so I'll give you the example that I quoted earlier. The guy that's retired that was taking testosterone, he got popped. How
Mm,
he got popped for uh Winstrol and I think Masterone.
mm.
And like like on paper, and this is so suspicious that I know this much, but I follow a bunch of YouTube channels, and I digest this stuff because it's infuriating. But it doesn't make sense for you to be taking both of those or either one of those without testosterone. Like it's like a bro cycle.
Mm,
And so I was like, well, he popped for Masterone and Winstrol. Like more plates, more dates told me that you have to have a testosterone base. He didn't get popped for testosterone. Come to find out, it was tainted testosterone. He wasn't taking Masterone or Winstrol. They were tainted.
mm. So like the shit he was getting was like not pure. Like so he was intending to take testosterone, but instead was taking like these other compounds.
Yeah,
O-
inadvertently. So
Okay,
it was a tainted supplement.
gotcha. But he was intentionally trying to take testosterone, which is banned.
Yes.
But he got popped for something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you like? So, what do you think about like? I mean, I know Olivia's not taking anything,
No.
but like, what do you think of the lifters, like the international level lifters in the United States? Because like, USADA is like fucking crazy from what I've heard. Like showing up at your house at like 3 a.m. And like testing people like insane. So, what do you think? People in the U.S. Do you think they're like getting around these tests, or do you think like because of our super strict like doping protocols over here that there's like fewer athletes that are on gear?
So yes and no. So there are definitely a few athletes that are very, very high performing that I know for a fact aren't taking anything. And like, Olivia, I know for a fact she's not taking anything. Like the woman, like literally all she eats is Caesar salad. I mean, they're great. I like Caesar salads too. I doubt she's gonna watch this, so I'm not too worried about it. But and then there's other athletes, and I won't go into specifics, but like there's this one guy, strong as an ox, and he's built for weightlifting, and he just clean and jerk like 200 kilos, and it was I think a 15 kilo PR in less than a year, and I know it for a fact just because I know the guy, he's not taking anything, like he's not
Mm-hmm.
smart enough, and I don't mean that in a mean way, but like he's smart in other ways, but like he wouldn't know what he was doing,
Mm-hmm.
and he's hopped around coach to coach, and I mean he trains very vigorously, but like he's not being supervised from that side of things. I know that for a fact.
Mm-hmm.
There are other athletes that I know of, and there are coaches that I know. And again, I'm not going to go into specifics, and it's case by case. It's athlete to athlete, and it's any strength sport. And I could be talking about powerlifting. I'm not just singling out weightlifting. Uh, that have a history with doping.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you want to draw the line of doping? Do you want to say peptides? Do you want to say HGH? Do you want to talk SARMs? Like you want to say orals or what's a natty stack or not natty stack? Like, I mean, or like testosterone boosting, which is a whole other side of things where you can naturally, produce more testosterone through, an insane protocol. But it's a fuzzy line because some sports will allow this and other sports won't allow that. So, like in peptides, they were legal for a period of time, or SARMs, they were legal for a period of time. Certain SARMs are still legal for now. Certain peptides are. So the science is always three steps ahead of testing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's they're like, and again, like this is from confidential conversation. I won't go into specifics of who it was, where it was, or any of that detail. But there are high level athletes that have competed internationally. I'm not going to say that they currently are or not, that were microdosing certain compounds to where you could take something, get the benefits of it, and as long as you stayed within that 6 hour window of not getting tested, you were good. It'd be
Hmm.
out of your system. And like you can take those things with really short half lives, get it out of your system, and 72 hours and be back to being natural.
Mm-hmm.
Or I mean, you could even talk about the Soviet Russian mentality where they thought that one of the most anabolic things that they could do outside of PEDs was put a room full of military age males in a room together and have them on a training program. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
super anabolic.
Yeah.
So it's a fuzzy line because I'm a spectator of combat sports, and I think that certain compounds should be legal for longevity of the athletes and their overall long term health. Because it's like Tony Ferguson, that guy needed to be on HGH and stem cells years ago. Like he'd
Mm-hmm.
be Tony Ferguson we had when he was going to fight Khabib in 2017. But now
Mm-hmm.
we just have this bag of meat and scars.
So tell me this: do you subscribe to Clarence Kennedy's argument that the current system is unfair in terms of like anti-doping, and that we should just basically get rid of anti-doping and say, hey, anyone can take whatever they want?
So this is not looking good for me because I've actually had this conversation with Clarence in Ireland a
Hmm.
few years ago, and he didn't openly admit back then that he was blasting anything. He's since you know non-directly came forward and said he's not natural, but I do
I
agree.
think he's directly said it. I think he's owned up to it.
He's said that I'm like someone asked him, "Are you natural?" And he's like, "No, I'm
Yeah.
enhanced." But,
Yeah.
he doesn't go into specifics, and that's fine. He doesn't compete. I don't care. It's his life. It's his body. It's his choice. Uh, but he he's got a really well thought perspective, but also I think he's a little bit jaded based on the era of weightlifting that he went through.
Mm.
Ireland was never known for a weightlifting program. They didn't have a whole lot of funding. He didn't have a whole lot of backing. He had a lot of opportunities to train in Poland, and I think he got discouraged. And he's a very, and this is where I think weightlifting can be a double-edged sword. He's very intelligent, and I think he had a lot of time to think and process information. And I think he overprocessed his environment as far as competing in weightlifting and chalked it up to, if I want to be elite, I'd have to have all this backing from a federation and
Mm.
all this doping protocol to even hold a candle to some of these athletes. And to a degree, he's right. And then you see other athletes like in the US who are rising to the occasion, competing against these enhanced athletes and are taking them down one by one.
Hmm.
And it takes athletes from a very young age to get to that point, but it can be done.
Yeah. Case in point, Olivia, right?
Yeah.
Like that, man, that was so cool to see that performance at the World Cup.
Oh yeah. Well, and not many people know this. Like I've known Olivia, and I'm not claiming to be friends with her because I might say like a handful of words to her, something funny she gets annoyed by. Um, I really give her younger sister a hard time. If you've ever met Haley Reeves, she's a diamond in the rough. She's a little stick of dynamite. But I've known Olivia since she was, I think, 9 or 10 years old. And
Hmm.
back then, I think one of her first meets was at Nashville Weightlifting Club. And back then, I remember seeing her lift, and she had that little grin, and she had that little steely-eyed gaze. And I was her center judge for her first competition, qualifying for what is that, youth nationals.
Hmm.
And she kind of freaked me out a little bit. I couldn't make eye contact with her. So I was looking everywhere else in the room. I was like, why is she just like hawking me right now?
Yeah.
So even
Yeah.
if she misses, I'm giving her a white flag.
Yeah. Yeah, her mindset is like it's crazy that like she just, certain people like go out on the platform, they're like, in the zone, focus, and she's just like hopping and skipping out there. She's got this huge smile on her face, which is interesting because like every time I talk to Steve, I'll see him at like national meets and stuff like that, and I think I saw him at one in um, Nashville like last year, and like every time we chat, I'm like, "Hey, how's it going? How's Olivia's training?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a lot of tears. It's a lot of tears. Like, it's so tough, and like, she's struggling with these weights and stuff." And then she goes out on the platform and just like murders it, just like crushes it.
I don't
Um,
want to I don't want to speak for her, but I think there's a lot of hard work that goes into the mental aspect of her career as well. Like obviously, I mean, she pours her blood, sweat, and tears into strength training, but she'll openly talk about it. You have to kind of flat out ask her about it. But she spent a lot of time like visualizing self-talk and intentionally having that posture or that smirk on her face
mhm.
because it kind of sets the pace of the kind of day she's going to have.
Yeah, interesting. Well, hey, I think it's working out for her pretty well.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, we're kind of getting to the end of time here, so there's a few things. Well, basically, what I want to do to finish up is just shoot you some rapid fire questions. So, give you some questions. Just give me kind of your first inclination, your first thought, and we'll go from there. Cool.
Cool.
All right, weightlifting crush. Who is it? We won't
Oh, my
tell.
wife. I
We
gotta
won't.
say my wife.
Oh, I was gonna say we won't tell Emily, but okay, fair enough. Fair
Well,
enough.
the little Italian girl. I don't know her name, but she's real spunky and
Uh,
she's got an attitude, and I admire that.
Wait, Juliana or something
Yeah,
like that?
Juliana. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Favorite post competition meal?
Oh, pizza and beer.
Yeah. No whiskey.
Oh, yeah, whiskey. Yeah, then whiskey. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
chaser.
Pizza and beer with whiskey. Gotcha. Favorite lift of all time. So like the best like competition lift that you've observed.
Oh, that I've observed.
Yeah. So not you
Ooh.
personally, but like best lift that you've ever seen.
Probably Joe Neal. He had to make a 165 clean and jerk to stay in a competition, and he missed the first two because he went way too heavy, and then just found it somehow on the third one. I remember just like thinking, "Whoa,
Good old Joe Neal.
yeah,
How's he doing?
he's doing great, man. He's got like a mullet mohawk thing going on."
Nice. All right. Your favorite weightlifter of all time.
Apate Akhanov,
Okay. Okay. Nice.
that
I thought,
squat jerk, just
oh
something
man,
about it.
like the internal rotation and like the position he gets that bar in back in that squat jerk. It's so pretty.
Just technician.
Your personal favorite moment in your weightlifting career.
Oh, you were there for that. That 135 snatch that I saved, that was on the
Mm.
edge of my heels. And like I was about to just guillotine myself and I found it. And then I
You
went
get
up 5 kilos and it made it look better than my opener.
yeah, yeah. You're like chin down, chin down.
John North it.
I don't think you could not have gone like a fraction of a centimeter further back and made that lift. That was like the edge of as
Yeah. That
far
was for
back
the
as you could
Puerto
go.
Rican national championship too.
Yeah. Was that I thought that was Pan Am's. That was
That was a Pan Am
nationals?
qualifier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Last question is which lift is easier, the snatch or the jerk? And why is it the jerk?
Snatch. Guys suck at jerks, man.
This is a conversation we'd always have is like, you'd be like, I'd say, you'd struggle with jerks. And I'd be like, man, the jerk is so easy. It's the easiest lift. You'd be like, no,
Piece
fuck
of
that.
shit.
Snatches are so easy.
Yeah,
Why
you
can't
get
you
so
figure it
mad at
out?
me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Awesome, man. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for being on, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
yeah, absolutely. Make sure you subscribe to Andrew's podcast for more.
I don't know if it's going to be a podcast, if I'm just going to publish it to YouTube. I'm really not entirely sure. Like I said, to me, this is more, it's kind of like a selfish thing, honestly. It's like a professional development thing. And I want
Okay.
to get people on here and just like get people with different perspectives on training, and, try to get as much information from them as possible. And I'll publish it. And if people find value in it and they want to watch it, then, that'll be an added benefit. So
Then like and subscribe.
like and subscribe. Yes, sir.